Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. The last 2 weeks have been certifiably insane between the leaks that are happening and the bombshell articles that are coming out left and right about what's going on in this administration. And it's just been a lot. I was trying to... there's just been so much that in trying to pull together the news stories for this week, it was really difficult, as it was kind of in the beginning of the administration, to figure out what was the most vital. But I think I've got a good mix. We're going to talk about a lot of different stuff. And yeah, so I am recording this on Thursday the 24th at about 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Anything that happens between now and when this is released is not my responsibility. This is also my second time recording this episode because the first time I didn't record it with video, which is critical for the fact that I post reels on Instagram and TikTok. Yeah. Second time's a charm, I guess. Sorry, let's get into it. First up, we have the El Salvador and U.S. relations. Last week, Donald Trump met with the El Salvador president, Nayib Bukele, aka the world's most suave and cool dictator. Make no mistake, his title is president of El Salvador. That man is a dictator. Okay? Trump immediately stirred controversy by suggesting that, quote, homegrown criminals, aka U.S. citizens, could and should be deported to El Salvador's mega prison, CICOT. The direct quote was, if it's a homegrown criminal, I have no problem. We're studying the laws right now. If we can do that, that's good. Okay. Then he told Bukele to build 5 more CICOTs. For reference, CICOT holds, I think the numbers are like 40,000 people. He needs 4 more CICOTs. Okay, fine. The other thing is that CICOT is full of, I'm going to say, alleged criminals, and they have no release date. This is not a place where you get sentenced to a certain amount of time and you go serve your sentence there and then you go off and live your life. This is a place where you go to die. Point blank. On top of this, in a moment that was quite literally Orwellian during this meeting, Stephen Miller told Trump out loud in front of cameras and mics that the Supreme Court ruled 9-0, quote, in our favor against the district court ruling, saying no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy. This is quite literally not true. The Supreme Court did rule 9-0, which is a feat in and of itself. This court has never ruled, I don't think, 9-0 on anything. It's always 6-3 or 7-2 is like the closest I'll get. But they did not rule in favor of the Trump administration. They ruled quite the opposite, that he needed due process. They also said that he needed to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return to the U.S. Half of the admin is arguing semantics about what facilitate means. Stephen Miller is outright lying about what the ruling said. Caroline Leavitt is lying and saying that Abrego Garcia is 100% confirmed certified gang member. Rubio is saying that courts can't determine the foreign policy. Like, they can't even pick which part of the story they should all agree on. But the bigger part is Stephen Miller lying about this to Trump's face. And Trump just kind of takes it at face value. If, Donald Trump has some culpability here, he should be performing his own research. I assume he has access to Google. But if these are the people that are giving Trump his information and they're giving him information that is certifiably false, then Trump doesn't even have the ability to get in front of a camera and say the truth. Is that how they're running this? They just lie to his face and so then he has deniability? I don't know. But the whole moment was just insane. And the fact that the media did not immediately call him out on it and say, hey, shorty, you're lying, is insane to me. The media was right there. He said this in front of cameras and microphones. I just can't. But also in the meeting, they didn't choose to speak about it. The media did actually ask them about the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And both Bukele and Trump said that neither of them have the power to bring Abrego Garcia home, which just makes me confused because if the president/dictator of El Salvador doesn't have the power and the president of the United States doesn't have the power, who has the authority to release people from CICOT? Nobody, at least Trump and Bukele, have not answered that question, which seems vital when you're sending people that shouldn't be there to that prison. We've already established that there is no publicly or court-provided evidence that Abrego Garcia is a gang member. The Trump admin has admitted in court that he was removed in error, and yet they are so adamant that he cannot and will not be coming home. Their latest tactic is when people or news articles call him a Maryland man, they're like, he's not a Maryland man, he's a gang member, he's a violent criminal. It literally hurts my brain, like the hoops that they are jumping through. I did also want to address the gang member claims because there's been a lot of back and forth on this, and ultimately, like, the way it's divided is Republican talking heads saying that he's a gang member and Democrats saying no, that if he's not. But the story dates back to 2019, where he was picked up by police and he said he was not in a gang. One cop asserted that he was in a gang. That same year, despite all of that interaction, an immigration judge ruled and shielded him from deportation due to him most likely facing persecution by a local gang that had extorted his family and then tried to recruit him before he fled to the US. Trump and his team notably did not get that order overturned before putting him on a plane and shipping him to the gulag in El Salvador. So, ultimately, the story of him being in a gang circles back to a singular police officer. Not the courts, not any evidence, just the word of one Maryland cop, which, if that's the way we're going to run our deportations, I guess you are whatever the closest Maryland cop says you are. That's awesome. The way this issue is really shaking out right now is that this is becoming I don't want to say winning issue, but this is an issue that is breaking through for the average voter, for people that, are not like me and reading the news every day, that this is something that your average Joe knows about, which is good for the Democrats if they can hammer home that this is a issue about due process and our rights. And also, overwhelmingly, in polls that are starting to come out now, Americans overwhelmingly agree that if you're going to deport somebody, you gotta prove it. You can't just no due process onto the plane and into CCOT. Most Americans agree that is not the way that things should be done. And the fact that the Trump administration is doubling down and saying he's a gang member, pulling out pictures of tattoos on his hands that are really just nondescript, like little like cartoony kind of tattoos, like it's a reach. And I feel like they're doing that because they are scared that they are on the losing side of this. But I think that they knew that with the DOJ guy admitting in court that it was an accident, that wouldn't break through, which it hasn't. As much as we are saying, me and the media are saying that they said that, it's not really breaking through to Republicans. And so they're doubling down by like pretending that whole thing never happened and then saying, no, he's in a gang. Democrats want to protect gang members. Democrats want gang members, illegal, violent gang members in the United States. Like, I don't know. The whole, like, I think Democrats are doing the messaging on this well enough. I think they could be doing more. But to watch the Republican side of it is wild because they just keep pulling out new things. Like every week it's something new about Abrego Garcia and him being in a gang, which he's not. We already established that he's not. I don't know. I'm still keeping my eye on this, if anything, to see what new stories they find out about Abrego Garcia. But like I said, they can't really keep their story straight and keep what the, thing of the day is with this case. So, whatever. On the bright side, in this case, Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland flew to El Salvador last week to see what the heck was up and was immediately stonewalled. He met with Felix Ulloa, I've totally butchered that last name, who is the vice president of El Salvador, aka the vice dictator of El Salvador. In that meeting, Van Hollen called it an illegal abduction and asked to see Abrego Garcia to ensure his safety and health. They refused to let him see Abrego Garcia both virtually and in person, which was a little bit odd. But then all of a sudden, the next day, they were like, okay, you can see him now. Okay. Here's where like my conspiracy theory hat is like tinkling a little bit. So they all of a sudden are like, you can see him. They give Abrego Garcia either his clothes back or the sickest fit that a prisoner has ever seen. And they have Van Hollen and Abrego Garcia meet in what looks like a restaurant. If you look at the pictures, they're in a very scenic place. Like, it looks like a restaurant at a resort. But in the pictures, there's a bunch of tables with silverware and glass coffee cups, teacups, and it's very scenic. The vibes just felt weird. I understand that the optics for this are important, both for El Salvador and Trump, that Democrats totally walked in expecting that if they did see him, he would be looking disheveled and crusty and dirty and, unfed, whatever. So I think this was an optics thing, but it's so incredibly bizarre to me that they were like, all of a sudden, you can meet him, but it has to be at this restaurant with the teacups. I don't know. Regardless, Van Hollen did get to meet with Abrego Garcia, and he was in good health, and he was fine, aside from the fact that he's in an El Salvador gulag. And Van Hollen was able to call Abrego Garcia's wife and, essentially say, like, I laid eyes on him. I spoke to him. He sends his love. On top of that, a group of Democrats flew to El Salvador this week on their own dime to see what the heck was up. I haven't read anything else about what has come of that trip. Nothing yet. The Republicans are calling it treason. They use their own funds. Like, I'm not even gonna get into that. But yesterday, apparently, I think it was DHS, somebody somewhere in the government leaked Abrego Garcia's wife's address, and she had to go to a safe house. Like, I'm happy that this issue is breaking through, but keep in mind that she's a real person. She is a wife and a mother to his children, to Abrego Garcia's children, and she's living this. And the fact that somebody in the government was so careless so as to post her address online is insane. Insane. Like I said, this is an issue that I think we need to keep the pressure on. I think keeping the pressure is what gave Van Hollen the opportunity to meet with Abrego Garcia. And I don't think this is the issue that there's a sect of Democrats saying that this isn't the hill that we should die on. I'm going to disagree. I think if there is any issue that Democrats should die on the hill for, it's this one. It's due process. Like, that is such an easy win. Such an easy win. The people that are saying we don't need due process are, count them out. Count them out of the revolution. The other thing I wanted to address was the term disappearing. There was a viral tweet, I think it was a couple weeks ago, it said something about, like, Democrats don't want to say the word deportation anymore, so they're using the word disappearing. They're two different things. Let's be clear. Deportation is what you do when somebody is illegally in the country and you deport them back to where they came from. Okay? That's normal. That's deportation. Disappearing is when you snatch somebody off the street, send them to a place that nobody can keep track of them, nobody can speak to them, nobody can find where they are, and they might not even be illegally in this country. There's a difference. There is a very clear difference, and people are not using the term disappearing lightly. Like, the grad students that are snatched off the street, those people are disappeared. Whatever. It's frustrating. This whole thing is so frustrating, and I think this is a story that's going to be in the news for months and months and months. Moving on, we're going to talk about the DOJ versus Maine on their transgender athletes. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced a lawsuit against Maine's Department of Education, accusing it of violating Title IX by allowing transgender girls to participate in girls' sports. This comes on the heels of Governor Janet Mills standing up to Trump at a governor's meeting, and then him demanding an apology, which she did not give. Good for Janet. Maine officials argue that their policies are inclusive and lawful, setting the stage for a significant legal battle over transgender rights in sports and education as a whole. Pam Bondi admitted, in front of cameras, that the policy affects a very minuscule number of people, which is wild because it's basically admitting that they're wasting government resources and funds just to hurt 5 people. I'm pretty sure that's how many transgender girls there are competing in high school sports. 5 people. All this money, all this effort for 5 people. Mills said, quote, "For nearly 2 months, Maine has endured recriminations from the federal government that have targeted hungry school kids, hardworking fishermen, senior citizens, new parents, and countless Maine people. We have been subjected to politically motivated investigations that opened and closed without discussion, leaving little doubt that their outcomes were predetermined. Let today serve as a warning to all states. Maine might be among the first to draw the ire of the federal government in this way, but we will not be the last." And she's right to be saying that. Linda McMahon, the WWE star turned education secretary, which is weird because I thought the Department of Education shut down a couple of days ago, but she's still around. Anyways, she said, quote, "I hope Governor Mills will recognize that her political feud with the president will deprive the students in her state of much more than the right to fair sporting events." Okay, Linda. Again, so what you just admitted is you're willing to tear all these people down, hurt other people, hurt children, hurt elderly, hurt fishermen, whatever, just so the kids can have a quote-unquote fair sporting event. And I get it. This is an issue that riles the Republican base up, and an issue that does not rile the Democratic base up to the same degree. So Linda is making a point, yes, and I'm happy for that, but it's unfortunately on an issue that isn't going to rally the Democratic base as a whole, the same way that it's rallying the Republican base. So I think she is doing the right thing, and I think, like, they're literally saying out loud, they're doing this for a very small amount of people and wasting money. Where is Doge when we need it? God. This has been going on since, I think, like, the weekend that Donald Trump was elected was when Janet Mills, kind of spoke out of turn to him. So this is probably going to be a long legal fight. So we'll see where the cookie crumbles. But I think Janet Mills is right in saying that states that stand up to Trump need to sleep with one eye open because he's not playing around. And, ultimately, if you want somebody arrested and you dig hard enough, you can probably find a crime that they've committed. Anyways, on to other people. that have stood up to Donald Trump. Harvard University has refused to comply with the Trump administration's demands to alter its diversity programs and share admissions data. The Trump administration basically wrote a letter to Harvard and said, affirmative action for conservatives. Okay. In response, the administration has frozen over $2 billion in federal funding and threatened the university's tax-exempt status, to which I say, tax the churches. I say this because Donald Trump said that Harvard, the reason he wanted to revoke their tax-exempt status was because Harvard is not serving public interest and therefore needed to lose the tax-exempt status. Plenty of churches out there that are not serving the public, that are getting involved in politics. Let's do them too. Like, you can't pick and choose, Donnie. You can't pick and choose which private institutions get to be tax exempt. Harvard then went on this week to sue the Trump administration for freezing that money. Tons of schools have come out in support of what Harvard has done, including Obama, who just a couple weeks ago finally spoke out and said, like, these law firms, these schools, these people need to stand up. And you know what? Good for Harvard, because I think history will look kindly on Harvard and not on Columbia, who so notably bent the knee to Donald Trump. I do also want to talk about the broader implications of anti-intellectualism. There's this weird, and I get it, like, Harvard is the epitome of elitist education, to say the least. But he bit off more than he could chew with that. He would have been better off going after, like, those small liberal arts schools that, like, don't have the type of funding and don't have the world's top lawyers as their alumni. He bit off more than he could chew with Harvard. But beyond that, there's this big wave of anti-intellectualism in the Republican Party, and it's twofold. One, it's a lot of people saying, well, you should have gone to trade school. Yes, the world needs people in trade school, but the other part of it is that they don't like people that get quote-unquote useless degrees. Now, are there some degrees that are genuinely useless? Maybe. I'm not going to say yes because I am a person that probably has what many would consider to be a useless degree. I went to college and I majored in sociology and I minored in Chinese language and international politics. Now, I knew, probably by my second year of college, that if I did this, I was going to need to go to graduate school. And I was okay with that. But I knew that was what was going to happen. What I don't agree with is the fact that Republicans seem to think that these degrees mean nothing to society. The world needs historians. The world needs writers. The world needs your regular scientists. Like, you need the humanities. Granted, those jobs are low paying, which makes it harder to pay off your loans if you have them. But what my quote-unquote useless degree taught me was how to be a critical thinker and how to be a decent enough communicator, which are skills that I then took on to my master's degree and into the career that I have now. And the degree that they always choose to use it on is gender studies, which is also just a bad example because gender studies ultimately really looks at how men and women, which is gender, shape things like society, culture, politics, history. It is still, like, to me, gender studies is just a different version of history or sociology. That's still important. Like, I feel like gender studies is such a buzzword because they take it to mean, like, you're exploring if trans people are like, I don't even know. I would love to do an interview on the street and ask people what you think gender studies is. Regardless, their anti-intellectualism comes from wanting everybody to go to a trade school, which is so bizarre. That doesn't fix anything either. Otherwise, we're going to have too many plumbers and electricians, whatever. And also the fact that they don't like quote-unquote useless degrees that actually aren't that useless. Like, you still need critical thinkers. I don't know. And they've targeted Harvard as kind of institution that embodies that anti-intellectualism, which is wild because having a degree from Harvard is probably the most valuable school you could have a degree in, even if it's in gender studies or sociology. So I don't know, but you know what? I love my useless degree. It taught me to be a better person. It gave me good research skills and ultimately helped breed my passion for politics and policy. It's a shitty thing to do. I understand that there are degrees that make it tougher to get a job, but I feel like everybody needs to be realistic about their degree. And if you're studying something like sociology, psychology, gender studies, you need to be thinking about what's the career I want to use with this degree. Moving on to more exciting news. We're going to talk about the Blue Origin spaceflight. So this 30-second flight to space was organized by Lauren Sanchez, who is the girlfriend of Jeff Bezos. Katy Perry, Lauren Sanchez, Gayle King, Aisha Brown, Amanda Wynn, and Carrie Ann Flynn were on the flight together. hanging out, girl time, deservedly faced a lot of criticism. They like marketed it as this step for women and made it really feminist, like, which was not the vibe I got at all. The vibe I got was out of touch, silly, and stupid. Gayle King was really offended by those comments. Like, she was like, I don't understand why people aren't supporting it. Gayle, it's because you have so much money, that you chose to spend it on going to space. That's not normal. Like, we as normal Americans can't even fathom having enough money to give to Lauren Sanchez and be like, oh, I'm gonna go to space. Like, and there's nothing wrong with sending civilians to space. NASA did it with the Challenger. Granted, it blew up, but they tried to bring teachers, or a teacher, or was it multiple? I don't know. I'm not up to date on my Challenger history, but they tried to bring regular civilians onto the flight. Had it worked, it would have been cool. It would have been cool to have a civilian in space. What's not cool is space tourism, where you are paying, I don't even know how much they paid, but probably more than a couple $1 million to go into space. That's not cool. What's cool is like a scientist going up there and filming a show for kids. Like, I don't understand why Gayle King was so confused. Katy Perry was just so cringy the entire time, of course. By far the funniest part was the fact that it only lasted like 3 minutes. The headlines were like 9 minutes ago, they have launched into space. And then 10 minutes later, it was like, Katy Perry has returned from space. What was I thought they were spending like a while up there, but here we are. And the other funny part of it was that when I don't even know the word for it, the shuttle hit the ground, Jeff Bezos went running over to save Lauren Sanchez from it and tripped and fell on his face in front of the cameras. Just one billionaire eating shit on the ground can make your day. Bottom line with that, though, is that it was super out of touch. There are people genuinely struggling, can't pay their bills, can't buy groceries, worried about their kids and their schools, like worried about their job. And they're like, I wonder why people are upset. Gee, Katie, I wonder why. Moving on to everybody's favorite Fox News weekend host, Pete Hegseth, is under renewed scrutiny. Again, renewed scrutiny? I feel like he's just never not been under scrutiny. Anyways, following reports that he shared that same sensitive U.S. military plan with his wife, who, remember, 2 weeks ago, we said that he was bringing his wife to meetings, and I said, how odd. Maybe it's not that odd, considering she's getting the heads up and the briefings in a Signal chat. Anyways, Hegseth's wife, who I also found out is a former Fox News producer. That's awesome. His brother, who does hold a position at DOD, and his personal attorney, which is odd. I actually don't even I can't even make up an excuse for him on that one. In that group chat, he shared details that encompass specific timings and operational plans. The only defense I will give Hegseth is that at the very least, the first group chat, although it had 13 people or 15 people, whatever it was, they were all people that should have been in the know about these bombings. Who shouldn't be in the know is your wife, personal attorney, and brother. Maybe the brother, considering he has a position at DOD, but like your wife and your personal attorney? Broader than this, though, there is just widespread chaos at the Pentagon. Pete Hegseth fired, I think it was 2 or 3 people within his like inner circle and accused them of being leakers, which, okay, fine. But then at the Easter egg roll, he got in front of the camera and was like, isn't it funny that I fire leakers and then you report that I have a group chat with my wife? Also, it's the same media that was repeating the Russia hoax. Pete, we are well past the Russia hoax. We have moved on to bigger things, such as your Signal group chats with your wife. Why can he not think of anything else except the Russia hoax? I really think you guys should go watch that video. It's actually hilarious because it is at the Easter egg roll. So as he's speaking to the media, there's like a jazz quartet in the background playing as he's like, the Russia hoax, there's literally like just like joyful children and music. Anyways, after all of this, he just really seems to not have a grasp on his people because there's now reports from more leakers, so he clearly did not get them all, that he's threatening to make everybody take polygraphs to prove that they're not leaking. Gee, I wonder why the Fox and Friends weekend host, who couldn't run a small organization, is struggling to run an organization with hundreds of thousands of personnel. I totally didn't see that one coming. Doesn't help that he's a drunk. In terms of other unsecured stuff, a Washington Post exclusive detailed that there was an inadvertent sharing of a Google Drive folder with the entire staff of the General Services Administration. The folder included detailed White House floor plans. This did occur under both Biden and Trump, which makes me think that Hegseth is a symptom of a much broader problem, but that doesn't make it still doesn't make it any better. It's like, what is our government doing? Why? And I hate to be the person that's like, oh, it's so simple, because it's not. Like, I get it. Like, there's bureaucracy, there's other stuff that goes into this, but like, what do you mean the detailed White House floor plans were shared with 1,000 people? What do you mean Pete Hegseth has his wife in a Signal group chat where he's sharing war plans? I think the Atlantic report, the OG Signalgate, was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And now that that's out in the open, all these people at DOD are like, feel comfortable enough to go to the press and be like, by the way, this is happening too. The other thing I would say is that Pete Hegseth is like really mad about these leakers, but I feel like leakers, reach out to me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they're only leaking because the stuff that's going on in the Pentagon is so egregious and weird and wrong that they're feeling the need to go to the press. And ultimately, what these stories are they're just embarrassing for like pointing to Pete Hegseth's leadership as being awful. They're not saying anything, inherently sensitive, except that he's a bad leader, which again, who would have thought? Who would have thought the guy that stood up at a bar and yelled, "Kill all Muslims," would be bad at running the DOD? Had me fooled. I really thought he was going to go all the way. But I do not think that Hegseth is going to last much longer. There started to be leaks that Trump was looking for somebody to replace him. Hegseth denied it. Trump later denied it. I'm going to give him 90 days tops. I think he gets one more screw up before Susie Wiles steps in and is like, you need to get rid of him. He's got to go. Anyways, moving on. Now we're going to talk about how JD Vance, or JuDas Vance, killed the Pope. JD Vance was in Rome over Easter weekend because he's a little freak. Word on the street is it was because of negotiations, but I'm calling this a spring break trip considering his wife and all of his kids were there. Whatever. The Pope and JD, have a fraught history, which is really funny because JD Vance actively converted to be Catholic while the Pope was the Pope. So I'm not sure what he thought he was getting himself into, like, whatever. Vance has been critical of the Pope's social teachings, as are many, more conservative Catholics. He did attempt to see the Pope on Saturday. The Pope said, no thank you, and sent his number 2 to meet with Vance, who lectured him on the power of compassion. Love that. Then the Pope and Vance finally did meet on Sunday, and then right after that, the Pope released a message decrying the logic of fear. Go get him, Pope Francis. After that, the Pope promptly turned around and died on Easter Monday. So, baller way to go out standing on your principles. I feel like the Pope met JD Vance and said he cannot be saved, and God take him home. And God did. I'm honestly pissed and upset that probably one of the last people that the Pope spoke to was JD Vance. Like, oh my God, the poor guy. I am not a very religious person, but I did attend a Jesuit high school, which Pope Francis is notably a Jesuit. And the teachings of the Jesuits had a very profound impact on who I am. The Jesuits are heavily focused on social justice, as was so prevalent in everything that Pope Francis did, including staying in the modest house in the Vatican as opposed to the grand papal residency, or him preaching about the marginalized, the migrant communities, the poor, the sick, the calling the only Christian church in Gaza every day. He embodied so much of what I was taught throughout high school, and their messaging was just incredibly prevalent through Pope Francis, and I think exposed the world to who the Jesuits are as a religious order. I do have 2 tattoos on my body of Jesuit kind of slogans, I guess you would say. So even though I'm not religious, I'm deeply, deeply saddened by his passing, and I am scared a little bit that given the global shift to the right, that the conclave will elect somebody who is a 180 of Francis and takes the church back from all of the progress into the modern day that Francis had given it. So everybody say your prayers to whatever higher being you believe in, God, Shania Twain, I don't care, that they pick somebody that is normal or normal adjacent. Anyways, moving on to Nancy Mace, everybody's favorite South Carolina congresswoman. She had a meltdown in Ulta and then posted about it on the internet. So this story straight up made me angry, which is why I felt like I needed to share it with everybody. In a weekend trip to Ulta, you know, the makeup and beauty store, Nancy Mace was approached by a reported constituent and asked when she planned to host her next town hall. Mace immediately got defensive, started recording the guy on video, called him, quote, fucking crazy, said, quote, fuck you, and then assumed that he was gay. Let me break this down for you. The guy walks up, and we found this out later. The guy walks up and asks about her town halls, and she says, well, I had a bunch last year. Where were you at those? And he's like, wait, what? Like, so I asked when your next one was. She's like, well, you weren't at those ones. Also, I voted for gay marriage twice. And the guy was witty, like, in response, and he goes, do you think that's all I care about? She did not have a response to that. She then posted the video with the caption, quote, some unhinged lunatic, a man, wearing Daisy Dukes at a makeup store, got in my face today. Dems are nuts. So I went off, and I won't be backing down. I hold the line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Okay. I'm going to tell you where, like, my thought process went with this. So Nancy's video does not capture him approaching her. So I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. I was like, maybe he legitimately did, like, approach her crazy and then saw she was recording and, you know, backed off, started acting normal. Then the guy's point of view came out. He literally walked up to her and goes, Nancy? And she turns to him to acknowledge that she is Nancy. And then he just says, when is your next town hall? And she goes into this whole diatribe. My message to Nancy is that you represent everybody in your district. You don't just represent the people that voted for you or the people that agree with your ideologies. It was disgusting for her to assume that he was gay. Not even disgusting. It was also just weird. Like, who cares if you voted for gay marriage twice? What does that have to do with your next town hall? I will say, though, people were calling her out in the comments and they were like, Nancy, this is not a good look for you. Also, she acknowledged that she was in the face wash aisle, which is also where the guy was, in the face wash aisle, and then was like, why is a man at a makeup store? Nancy, he's in the face wash aisle. Men can wash their face with face wash. That's normal, I fear. She really thought she was making a point, and I think she totally missed it. And you can tell that she missed it because the other Republican talking heads are not amplifying it. That's how you know that something in the Republican sphere was a swing and a miss, because if somebody says something and it, like, hits, they'll all start parroting the same thing and, like, retweeting it and being like, Nancy, I'm on your side. When something doesn't hit, they all pretend it didn't happen. And Nancy's still tweeting it, trying to drum up support. Anyways, go watch the video. It is kind of insane. It did make me really angry to watch and just feel, like, very dystopian, but it's a good watch, if only to see her legitimately have a meltdown in public. And nobody else steps in, which I was like, Nancy, really, nobody cares about you. Nobody cared to step in. Last thing that I wanted to talk about was an article that came out on April 15th by Dana Mattioli. I got the push notification, and the headline caught my eye. The headline is, The Tactics Elon Musk Uses to Manage His Legion of Babies and Their Mothers. Now, I thought this was going to be an article by Ashley St. Clair, who came out, I think it was right before Trump was inaugurated, and said she had a baby with Elon Musk because a tabloid was about to publish a story on it, whatever. She didn't want to publicize it, but she did. This reporter apparently then decided to do some digging and I assume got an exclusive with Ashley St. Clair. And what I read was, one, disgusting, but two, I sent it to everybody I knew that, like, would be interested in it. And I was like, you need to read this article. Because normally when I read a long article, I read, like, the first 2 minutes of it. And then I'm like, okay, I get the gist. I read this thing front to back. The article is certifiably insane. I'm going to summarize and read you excerpts, okay? So, backstory. Ashley St. Clair is a Republican, I'm not even going to say Republican, a right-wing influencer. She's a very pretty woman. She's, I think, around 27 or 28. She's a young woman, but she had Elon Musk's baby a few months ago, and everybody was like, whoa, what? How odd, as you're fighting over custody with Grimes' kids, but okay. But that's the backstory. It turns out, you know what? I, like, don't even know how to get into this. I'll read you the first. Okay, yeah. Let's start from the top. Ashley St. Clair wanted to prove that Elon Musk was the father of her newborn baby. But to ask the billionaire to take a paternity test, the right-wing social media influencer had to go through Musk's longtime fixer, Jared Birchall. Birchall? We're going to go with Birchall. I don't want my son to feel like he's a secret, St. Clair told Birchall in a 2-hour phone call in December. Birchall offered St. Clair some advice. His boss, Elon, was a very big-hearted, kind, and generous person, he said, but Musk had a different side. When a mother of his child goes the legal route in these discussions, that always leads to a worse outcome for that woman than what it would have been otherwise, Birchall told, she's 26. Birchall told the 26-year-old. Plus, he said, Musk wasn't sure the child was his, which is an insane statement the more you get into this article. So that's the cast of characters. There's Birchall, who is organizing all of these deals with the baby mamas, okay? And then there's St. Clair, who blew the lid off of this stuff. So we know for a fact that Musk has at least 14 children with 4 women. Those are the ones that we know about because multiple sources close to the tech entrepreneur said they believe the true number of Musk children is much higher than publicly known. Musk offered St. Clair $15 million and $100,000 a month in support in exchange for her silence about the child, whom they named Romulus. Similar agreements had been negotiated with other mothers of Musk children, Birchall told St. Clair. Okay. The article then goes on to talk about how Musk is obsessed with the declining birth rate and how he wants to have more children and but he only wants children of those that are smart. And then it talks about his other baby mama, Siobhan Zillis, who works or worked for Musk at one of his companies. She had 4 of his kids recently. I'm pretty sure in between him and Grimes's kids, which is so freaking weird. But they were all by surrogate. So it's not even he cheated on Grimes. That's not the revelation here. Anyways, Zillis told Musk's biographer, quote, he really wants smart people to have kids, so he encouraged me to. He offered his sperm to Zillis, and the two have 4 young children together. Zillis is viewed as a steadying force in Musk's life and is the most prominent of Musk's mothers. She is often the woman that's with him in a lot of the official pictures. She's the woman, I don't know if you remember when he met Modi of India, and there was a woman there with a bunch of kids, and that's his baby mama. So then it goes into how he attracts these, I'm not even going to say attracts, how he tricks these women. Turns out it's via X. There are tons of dating apps that you could use, or you could just have your assistant set up a in-person date, but he's sliding into these women's DMs, and in the most bizarre and creepy way. Okay? Without even meeting them in person. He just sees hot right-wing influencer and he's need. Okay. So then we get into Tiffany Fong, who is Ashley St. Clair, a hot right-wing influencer. Elon started responding to her tweets, which of course he overinflates the algorithm so only his stuff gets shown. So she started getting tons and tons of followers and was raking in the cash, at one point pulling in $21,000 in a 2-week period. At that point, after she was like, thank you, Mr. Musk, he DM'd her. No information on if this was the initial DM or if there was more conversation. He DM'd her asking if she was interested in having his child. The two had never met in person. Fong didn't move forward with Musk because she pictured having children in a more traditional nuclear family. That's okay, Tiffany. I feel the same. But confided to a few friends about the approach, including Ashley St. Clair, whom she knew as another conservative social media figure. Hot girls love hot girls. And now she worried that turning him down could hurt her earnings. Guess what? It did. Because once Musk learned that Fong had disclosed the request to others, he chided her for not using discretion and unfollowed her, which contributed to a fall in her engagement, and her earnings declined. Now, St. Clair and Musk had met earlier in the spring of 2023 after Musk began interacting with her on X and followed her. Soon after, they were DMing, and then Musk invited her to visit the social media platform's office, and then their relationship turned romantic. Now we get to learn, begrudgingly, about Elon Musk's sex life. So this is from the horse's mouth. This is from Ashley St. Clair. She says, the first time they had sex, Musk joked that they should, quote, pick a name for their future child. He frequently talked to her about having children, she said. It was months later on a New Year's trip to St. Bart's that she told him she was ovulating. He asked her, what are we waiting for? And the two conceived their son on that trip. TMI from St. Clair, but thank you, I guess. St. Clair also revealed that he texts like a maniac because being in his inner circle meant that she got the inside scoop on everything that he was doing. Before Musk publicly supported Trump, he texted St. Clair, quote, I can't be president, but I can help Trump defeat Biden, and I will. Then, this one kills me. This one just kills me. Musk sent her a series of texts before the election and said, In all of history, there has never been a competitive army composed of women, not even once. Men are made for war. Real men, anyway. I am in full war mode, going to the front lines today. Must win Pennsylvania. And she doesn't comment about, like, what, and they don't say what she responded to these texts, but, like, as a woman, if a man texted me anything like that, even if it was, like, the lived up version where it was, like, going to canvas in Arizona today, we must win, I'd still be like, are you okay? Do you need help? So bizarre. The article then goes on to talk about Birchall, I don't know his name, and what he kind of does, and he really is just a fixer. He's doing everything. But the most important part in that section is that he was involved in acquiring the property for a compound in Austin where Musk imagined the women and his growing number of babies would all live among multiple residences. Another thing that was revealed in the article was Elon Musk reportedly, according to him, just donating his sperm. In 2023, he met people he described as Japanese officials who asked him to be a sperm donor for a high-profile woman. Quote, they want me to be a sperm donor. No romance or anything, just sperm. He texted St. Clair. Musk later told her he gave his sperm to the person who asked for it without naming the woman. That sounds like a weird fantasy to me. Like, that sounds like when you were in middle school and they were like, I have a girlfriend, but she goes to a different school, so you would know her. Oh my god. Okay. We're almost done. We're almost there. We're almost at the end. Back to the compound, though. Zillis, the woman that's like his right-hand woman, lives in this compound. He tried to get Grimes to move there, and she said, no, thank you. And he tried to get St. Clair to spend some time there, quote, with our kid legion. Okay. Back to Birchall. He tried to get her to send an NDA, saying that Musk cannot allow people to just go and share his life information. He's the biggest lightning rod in the entire planet. It also talks about Musk's custody fight with Grimes and how this is a real problem. He can pick and choose which kids like he wants to interact with. He basically bankrupted her because he's the richest man in the world. You are not going to be able to outspend Musk. And he's such a nut that I feel like he wanted his kids with Grimes out of spite. Because no other kids has he fought for custody with like this, except for the ones from Grimes. Also in the article, do you remember on the campaign trail when Musk was running around with that black MAGA hat? That was a custom-made gift from Ashley St. Clair. Listen, I can't fault a woman for knowing the perfect thing for her boyfriend, but like, unbelievable that he got it from his secret baby mama. At the time, secret baby mama. Then we get into the medical misinformation part. While St. Clair was pregnant, this is directly from the article, Musk had urged her to deliver the baby via cesarean section and told her that he didn't want the child to be circumcised. Musk has posted on X that vaginal births limit brain size and that C-sections allow for larger brains. Now, not to feed into it, but when my mom was pregnant with me, they said my head was too freaking big and I just happened to be born by C-section, and guess what? I am a smart cookie. Maybe he was onto something. Anyways, St. Clair is Jewish, so circumcision is important to her, and she decided against a C-section. He then told her she should have 10 babies, and they debated the child's middle name. Now, Musk, of course, was not at the birth, because why would he be? Why would he want to be a father? But while she was in labor, Birchall texted her about leaving Musk's name off the birth certificate. She complied with the request and did not name Musk on the birth certificate. And then after that was where Birchall pushed her to sign documents that kept the father of the baby and details regarding the relationship a secret in exchange for financial compensation to the tune of millions of dollars. Musk told her by text that it was dangerous to reveal his relationship to the baby, describing himself as the number 2 after Trump for assassination. He added that only the paranoid survive. Now, here's my problem with this. He thinks he's the number 2 for assassination, right? So why, if you think you are a target for assassination, do you keep putting your small child on your head? That's all I have to say about that. Bottom line, she didn't sign the NDA, which prevented her from speaking about Musk. And she said that one of the main sticking points for her was that it would have made her feel like her son was illegitimate. And it also didn't provide support for the child if he became gravely ill, or a trust fund or life insurance if Musk died before the child turned 21, because that's when the payments would have stopped. The article then goes on about how she wanted a paternity test, and they were still in this battle. And then one of the tabloids got word that she had had his baby. And so she decided to get ahead of it. And she posted on Twitter and said, 4 months ago, I had a baby with Elon Musk, suck it. After the post, Musk more than halved the support that he was offering, indicating that the money's being weaponized against her, which, whatever, that's shitty. Anyways, the Friday before the article was posted, the results came back on the paternity test. A report from LabCorp stated that the probability of paternity was 99.9999%. I do encourage you to read the full article. Like, when I tell you I was glued to my phone screen, I was glued to my phone screen. It truly just, like, don't have any words. Like, I knew that, like, he was slimy and weird, but, like, this is something else. This is something else. You know, can't hate a woman for following the money. Anyways, that is all I have for this week. Next week, I will be having a guest episode. I'm not sure who yet. I recently did some outreach, and it turns out a lot of people want to come on, so I'm still kind of figuring out the order of how things will go, but rest assured, all the people on the docket are awesome guests, and I'm really excited for all of them. But anyways, I will be back next week. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with somebody who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or you just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and don't find your baby mamas through Twitter DMs. I'll see you guys next week.